stunning bombshell claim by Kyiv Independent, citing Bloomberg, that Russia and the United States made a secret deal to end war in Ukraine. The reported claim that Russia confirms Zelensky's February 6 disclosure about the US-Russia economic proposal. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has confirmed the $12 trillion Russian pitch to Trump. He called it as a natural extension of shared economic interests. Bloomberg offered a detailed look at what Russia may be seeking from Trump. The outlet reported on February 12 that Russia seeks to secure a wide-ranging economic partnership with the US as part of an arrangement tied to Ukraine. Moscow wants relief from restrictions that have cut it off from the dollar payment system. Russia reportedly views the restoration of dollar-based settlements as part of a potential peace deal. Moscow reportedly seeks long-term contracts for American aircraft to modernize Russia's commercial fleet, as well as joint ventures in hard-to-recover oil extraction and liquefied natural gas production. The proposals also include cooperation in nuclear energy and expanded mining projects for lithium, copper, nickel, and platinum. Kremlin signals readiness to factor in previous American investments in Russia and contribute to compensation for losses incurred after Western companies exited the market following the start of Moscow's all-out war. U.S. firms would receive preferential treatment if they return to Russia's market. The plan also envisions joint efforts to promote fossil fuels globally as an alternative to the so-called green, climate-focused policies. At Ukraine's power corridors, Russia-US economic package is dubbed as Dmitriev package. The reference is to Kirill Dmitriev, an envoy who heads Russia's sovereign wealth fund and has remained engaged with top US officials, including Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. On February 6, Zelensky had claimed that intelligence had briefed him on what he described as a roughly $12 trillion framework for large-scale economic cooperation between Moscow and Washington. Taken together, the reported Dmitriev package suggests that Moscow is linking any movement on Ukraine not only to territorial and political demands, but also to a sweeping reset of economic relations with the United States. Russia sees the war in Ukraine as leverage to extract massive economic concessions from Washington while trying to push its maximalist demands for Kyiv. Moscow is not just negotiating over borders, it is negotiating over sanctions, trade, and the entire architecture of its economic relationship with the United States. For Russia, the war in Ukraine is no longer only about territory. It is leverage, a geopolitical bargaining chip aimed at extracting major economic concessions from Washington.
A stunning proposal from Moscow. According to an internal Kremlin memo reviewed by Bloomberg, Russia is exploring a sweeping economic partnership with US President Donald Trump's administration, including a return to the dollar settlement system. If realized, it would mark a dramatic reversal of years of Kremlin policy aimed at reducing dependence on the US currency. The high-level document reportedly outlines 7 areas where Russian and American economic interests could align, particularly if a peace deal is reached to end the war in Ukraine. Among them, joint investments in natural gas, offshore oil, and critical raw materials like lithium, copper, nickel, and platinum. The memo also envisions cooperation in nuclear energy, aviation contracts to modernize Russia's fleet, and preferential treatment for US companies re-entering the Russian market. At the heart of the proposal is the most striking shift of all, restoring Russia's access to dollar-based transactions. Since the 2022 invasion of Ukraine, Moscow has worked aggressively to move away from the dollar, deepening financial ties with China and expanding trade in alternative currencies. Western sanctions weaponized the dollar system against Russia, freezing assets and cutting banks off from global markets. Now, the Kremlin appears to be signaling openness to rejoining that very system. For Washington, such a move could strengthen the dollar's dominance and potentially weaken Moscow's growing reliance on Beijing. For Moscow, it could stabilize foreign exchange markets and reduce economic volatility. But the geopolitical implications are enormous. Western officials familiar with the memo reportedly doubt President Vladimir Putin would ultimately pursue a deal that undercuts China's interests, especially as Beijing remains a critical supplier to Russia's wartime economy. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has also claimed that Moscow and Washington are discussing large-scale economic agreements in parallel with peace negotiations. The proposal, dubbed the Dmitriev package, after Kremlin negotiator Kirill Dmitriev, could be part of that broader strategy. Whether this is a genuine pivot or a tactical maneuver remains unclear, but one thing is certain. If Russia were to return to the dollar system, it would signal a profound shift, not just in economic policy, but in the global balance of power.